7th session, and we're going to get right into this third vision on the 24th day of the 11th month in the second year of Darius. And tonight we'll look at the third vision, a man with a measuring line. And if you have a syllabus, this is page 35 in your syllabus tonight. So here we go, Zechariah chapter 2. And this is this third vision, a man with a measuring line. We looked at the other two, the last two sessions. So this is for tonight. And first I'll read through the whole vision, and then we'll go back and start looking at some things. Zechariah chapter 2, verse 1. He says, "Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, there was a man with a measuring line in his hand. So I said, 'Where are you going?' And he said to me, 'To measure Jerusalem, to see how wide it is and how long it is.' And behold, the angel who was speaking with me was going out, and another angel was coming out to meet him, and said to him, 'Run, speak to that young man, saying, Jerusalem will be inhabited without walls, because of the multitude of men and cattle within it. For I, declares Yahweh, will be a wall of fire around her, and I will be the glory in her midst. Ho there, flee from the land of the north, declares Yahweh, for I have dispersed you as the four winds of heaven, declares Yahweh. Ho, Zion, escape, you who are living with the daughter of Babylon. Verse 8. For thus says Yahweh of hosts, after glory he has sent me against the nations, which plunder you. For he who touches you touches the apple of his eye. For behold, I will wave my hand over them, so that they will be plunder for their slaves. Then you will know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me. Sing for joy and be glad, O daughter of Zion. For behold, I am coming, and I will dwell in your midst, declares Yahweh. Many nations will join themselves to Yahweh in that day, and will become my people. Then I will dwell in your midst, and you will know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me to you. Yahweh will possess Judah as his portion in the Holy Land, and will again choose Jerusalem. Be silent, all flesh, before Yahweh, for he is aroused from his holy habitation." Okay, so the first thing I'm going to look at here is not really the vision itself, but I wanted to cover this sometime while we are studying this here in Zechariah. And because this mentions the measuring line, I want to take a look at the temple and the area of Jerusalem that I believe they are at. Actually, the physical location, we'll look at a little geography here tonight to find out where are they? Where are they doing this building at here in Jerusalem? I don't know the condition of Jerusalem at this time, but I know that they are in the process of building the temple. And here he says, he looked, and there was a man with a measuring line in his hand. And he asked him what he's doing. He said he's going to measure Jerusalem to see how wide it is and how long it is. So in this first vision, a measuring line was also mentioned. And that was in Zechariah 1:16. He said, "Therefore, thus says Yahweh, I will return to Jerusalem with compassion. My house will be built in it, declares Yahweh of hosts, and a measuring line will be stretched over Jerusalem." And this got me interested, and I got asking myself the question, what does that mean? Why a measuring line? What is going on? What does the measuring line represent? And I think the context of what's going on here in the book of Zechariah is they're building the house of God. They're building the temple. There's a building project going on. His house is being built. Jerusalem is being rebuilt. But specifically, the temple is being built. So when I think of a measuring line, I think of a tape measure. I mean, if I was to do this today, or if I'm talking about a measuring rod, I think of a yardstick, a measuring device representing construction, representing that there's this going on, there's this construction project. And in the second vision, remember, it was the carpenters that overcame the horns. So there's this measuring line being stretched out. What does a measuring line represent? And I want to show you this in other prophecies. There's only a few other places where this is used. And I think in all instances, it's dealing with a building project, building with construction. Ezekiel chapter 40, in the vision to Ezekiel, he sees this. In the visions of God, he brought him forth to the land of Israel. He set him on a mountain, and there was a man whose appearance was like appearance of bronze, a line of flax, and there was a measuring rod in his hand, and he was standing in the gateway. And then in verse 5, it says there was a wall on the outside of the temple all around, and in the man's hand was a measuring rod of 6 cubits. So he measured the thickness of the wall. So he starts measuring the temple in Jerusalem. This is in this vision of Ezekiel. And then Ezekiel 40 all the way through 45 or 46 is dealing with the New Jerusalem, this rebuilding of this temple in Jerusalem. And it's dealing with a measuring rod. That prophecy in Ezekiel chapters 40 through 45 was given in the 25th year of Ezekiel being in exile, Ezekiel 40 verse 1. And it was written to the Jews living in Babylon. Many of them are some of these that have come back that are part of this group with Zerubbabel and Joshua. And that was about 52 years before 520 BC, where we are now, the time Zechariah is prophesying to rebuild the temple of Zerubbabel. In this prophecy, Ezekiel is given measurements for a new temple in Jerusalem. And this measuring line, when it's used in prophecy, is around Jerusalem, or it's about the temple, about measuring. In Ezekiel 45, he says, out of this there shall be a holy place about 500 cubits by 500 cubits. So this is a huge area that he's talking about in Ezekiel, about this temple to be built. In the temple described by Ezekiel, there's a holy place that measures 500 cubits by 500 cubits. Now, just to let you know, a cubit is the distance from the elbow to the hand. There's different lengths that people give. I found the best length is 18 inches, or 1.5 feet, is a distance that when you see a cubit, if you transfer that into the English measurement that we have today, it would be 750 feet by 750 feet, that temple that Ezekiel was talking about. I wondered if that was supposed to be the blueprint for Zerubbabel and Joshua's to build the temple, what Ezekiel gave. And I'll show you that they didn't build one this big. But I want to take a look at the temple a little bit. Another significant prophecy of a measuring device in prophecy is in the book of Revelation. And that's in Revelation chapter 11, verse 1 and 2. And in this vision to John, it says, "Then there was given me a measuring rod, like a staff. And someone said, 'Get up and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship in it. Leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations, and they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. Now, I think this is why, like, this is 42 months. I think this is in Daniel and in Revelation, you have a 7-year period. First 3.5 years are of peace and of prosperity. And then there's 3.5 years after the abomination of desolation is set up, when there's the wrath of God comes down, and it's not good. But the first 42 months is a time of peace and prosperity. And I really think that, according to this revelation, that could be the beginning of the 7 years. That they begin, just as we are here at the time of Zechariah and Zerubbabel and Joshua, they are building a temple. It's a construction project. They're building the temple, and it takes 42 months to build this temple. In the future, there is going to be another building project. A measuring rod is going to go out to measure the temple again, and that's going to be for 42 months. So I wanted to take a look at and show you, these are, we're going to look at Jerusalem. And where are we at? Where is Zerubbabel at to build this temple? Is it this location that we see in our modern day? And I'd like to take a look at this and kind of explore this, just to give you kind of understanding of the geography of Jerusalem and where the temple is. This is an aerial view. I got some of these off of this picture of the Temple Mount. This actually is my picture. This was when I went to Israel on the tour in 2018. I remember when I first stepped on, this is the Temple Mount area. That's the Dome of the Rock there on it. This Temple Mount area is huge. I remember thinking, this is huge. You're there, and it just seems like it's so big. This area outside of the Dome of the Rock. This is what's called the Temple Mount. But this is me with the group in 2018 going to visit this location. Now, just for history, the Dome of the Rock was built under the Islamic Caliphate Abd al-Malik in 691 to 692 AD. The Arab armies defeated the Byzantine Empire, which came out of the Roman Empire, the Byzantines, taking control of Jerusalem in 638 AD, and then, 60 years later or so, the Dome of the Rock was built by this Caliphate Abd al-Malik. So that means that Dome of the Rock has been sitting in this location, the holy place, in Jerusalem for 1,333 years. You hear that? 1,333 years. This is in this location. The Temple of Solomon only lasted around 500 years. The temple we're looking at right now that they built under Zerubbabel was rebuilt by Herod starting in 19 AD, and then it was destroyed in 70 AD. So the second temple only lasted a little over 500 years. So both the Judean temples, two of them, the first one by Solomon, the second one by the one that we're looking at right now, being built by Zerubbabel, stood in this location less time than the current Dome of the Rock that's sitting there, which has been there 1,333 years. That is amazing. And here we're still talking about this today, about this location. Why is this so important? This is my picture from 2006. I'm on the Mount of Olives here, This is the area where they say Jesus wept over Jerusalem when you were the tour guide. And this is my picture across the Kidron Valley. And that is, there you see the Temple Mount, you see the Dome of the Rock from this angle, from across the Kidron Valley from the Mount of Olives. Here's another sky view showing a different angle of this Temple Mount area. Here's another sky view, another vision of this area of the Temple Mount. And then here's this vision, this angle of the Temple Mount. Now I wanted to show you, because you probably have seen and heard about the Western Wall. You guys, you know that a lot of times they'll show the Jews praying at the Western Wall. Well, you see where I have that arrow in this picture? That part of Jerusalem, right there at the Western Wall, this is part of the Jewish quarter of Old Jerusalem. The Jews occupy there. They occupy up to that wall, which is the Western Wall. That's here. That's my picture at the Western Wall. That's looking flat at it. There's another view of the Western Wall, and they'll put prayers, and they believe that these rocks were part of Solomon's temple. And so they pray for the restoration of the temple here in Jerusalem. But the Temple Mount is up top. It's up on top. And that's up here, okay? Temple Mount up here, they're down here. Temple Mount is up here, they're down there. The Temple Mount is controlled by Jordan today, by the country of Jordan. And they work with Palestinians in the West Bank. But it's really the country of Jordan that has the control. That's why, the meetings with Jordan are so vital to understanding everything going on there in the Middle East. But this is controlled by Jordan. Israel gets to go to the Western Wall down there, and that's where they pray. All right? Just to get you a little idea of the conflict. So my question is, I'm thinking about, where is Zerubbabel? Where are they building? Is it this location? Do we know? Can we know that this is the right location? According to the scripture, and I'll show you in verses, Mount Moriah is where the temple was to be built, on Mount Moriah. This goes all the way back to Genesis 22, where Abraham was said, "Take now your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will tell you." Where Abraham offered Isaac, that which was a sign, which is symbolic and a type for the Christ, that was on Mount Moriah, where Isaac was offered. Then you have the record in Chronicles. This is where there was the plagues going on in Israel. And the plague killed thousands of people. And then in verse 18 of 1 Chronicles 21, it says, "Then the angel of Yahweh commanded Gad to say to David that David should go up and build an altar to Yahweh on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite." And if you read the record, the angel of Yahweh, again, the angel of Yahweh is standing over the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite with a sword drawn. So to stop the plague, verse 26, David built an altar to Yahweh there and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And he called to Yahweh, and he answered him with fire from heaven on the altar of burnt offering. Yahweh commanded the angel, he put his sword back in his sheath. At that time, when David saw that Yahweh had answered him on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, he offered sacrifice there. Chapter 22, verse 1. Then David said, "This is the house of Yahweh, and this is the altar of the burnt offering for Israel." And then when Solomon built the Temple of Solomon, 2 Chronicles 3:1, Solomon began to build the house of Yahweh in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, where Yahweh had appeared to his father David, at the place that David had prepared on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. That is where the temple was built. Okay. Mount Moriah, threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite on Mount Moriah. So then I said to myself, what's under the Dome of the Rock? Right? I always pictured in my mind, have you ever guys gone to Massachusetts and saw Plymouth Rock? It's like this big boulder, right? It's this boulder. I always pictured that what's under here is like this rock, like this boulder, this big boulder. And supposedly the Muslims believe that's where Muhammad ascended into heaven. And so in my mind, I always pictured this boulder. In 2006, we were with Regent University. Now, Regent University was very much in with the Jews. And we got to see a lot of things that you don't usually get to see because we had access because of their association with the Jewish nation. So we got to see a lot of things that you don't normally get to see. It was great. But one thing that they wouldn't allow is they didn't allow this group from Regent University to go into the Dome of the Rock. A lot of groups can't go into the Dome of the Rock. But you see this man with the ball cap there? This is 2018. That's Peter Miano. He was the head of the group that took us in 2018 to Jerusalem. Peter Miano speaks Arabic. And Peter Miano actually is in very good standing with the West Bank and the Arab nations in the West Bank. In fact, his offices are in Bethlehem, in the middle of the West Bank. And so he has a really good relationship with the Arab nations. And I don't know how he did it, but he got all of us, we all had to pay $10 to the Arab Authority, the Palestinian Authority under the Jordanian country. And then we got to go inside the Dome of the Rock. I'm like, okay, what is under here? What's under the dome? So here it is. And they let us take pictures. I couldn't believe they allowed us to take our cameras. We were able to take pictures. Here's what the Dome of the Rock is. Here's the rock. That's it. You know what it is? It's the top of a mountain. It is the bedrock. And it reminds me, here in the Adirondacks, I hike Cascade. This reminds me of the top of Cascade Mountain. What's under the Dome of the Rock is the top of Mount Moriah. It's the top of the mountain. They should have called it the Dome of the Mountain, in my mind, not the Dome of the Rock, because it's on the top of this mountain. And then the other thing is while we're there, they said there's this cave underneath it, and they let us go down to the cave that sits just below this mountaintop. And that's our Arab guide that took us down here, and we walked down, and this is underneath the top. And what he tells us, and he was explaining how this worked, what this is, he said, this was a threshing floor where the grain, they would separate the grain and the good grain, they would drop down in here and they'd collect it here under the threshing floor. And I'm like, oh, the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. That is what is under the Dome of the Rock. It is this rock with a threshing floor where they would gather wheat underneath. That's what's under the Dome of the Rock. That's the location that Abraham offered Isaac. That's the location where David, where the angel sword was drawn and he offered the sacrifice. This is the location where Solomon built the temple. This is the location. The Temple Mount is the top of Mount Moriah. And I was like, wow. Because I always wondered. But so this is the holy place. This is the center of the earth. Do you understand? This is where it's all going down. This is where Zerubbabel is right now. This is where the people are. And they see this vision, go measure Jerusalem. You are right here where God's building is to be built. That's where they are. So just to give you, I found this, some information on Ezekiel Temple, and I wanted to give you, this is in your notes, in your syllabus, just to give you, because I was wondering about sizes, different sizes of the different temples. Here on the left, and I got this from this website, which is in your, it's in your syllabus. And this is what they did with the Ezekiel Temple description from Ezekiel 40 through 45. It's a 750 feet by 750 feet. Again, I think you go with the 18-inch cubit. It works out really good mathematically to figure things out. And so that was the size of Ezekiel Temple. And then the tabernacle in the wilderness was 100 feet by 50 feet. And on this version that they had, Solomon's Temple, I've seen other renderings of this where it adds this court outside. So I think that's probably more accurate. Solomon's Temple was twice the size of the tabernacle. It was 300 feet by 150 feet. Down below, just to give you an example, that's a football field. How long is a football field? 100 yards or 300 feet by 150 feet. So Solomon's Temple was basically the size of an American football field, was the temple. The whole temple with the outside court, which was twice the size of the tabernacle. That was the size of that. Up on top, we have a good idea of Herod's temple based on the writings of Josephus. He was there at the time the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, and from his writings, that gives you the size of Herod's temple, which was really like twice the size of Solomon's temple, Herod's temple. So, but then I asked, well, what about Zerubbabel's temple? Because Herod's temple was a rebuilt. It was they rebuilt Zerubbabel's temple, and there's nothing in the Bible that gives us the dimensions of the temple that Zerubbabel's building. But I wanted to find, so then I found this article in the Jewish Encyclopedia. And it says, in the second year of the reign of Darius, the real building began. The people aroused to the effort by the preaching of Haggai and Zechariah, and in that course of 3 years, the rebuilding was accomplished. It is now generally recognized that the representation in the book of Ezra that the work was begun immediately upon the ascension of Cyrus and then was interrupted by opposition from Israel's neighbors. Of the dimensions of the temple, there are given but few details. Hecataeus, a Greek writer contemporary of Alexander the Great, is quoted by Josephus as saying that the temple area was enclosed by a wall, a plethora, or 500 Greek feet in length and 100 Greek cubits in breadth. Or, in our English feet, that's 485 and a half feet by 145 and a half feet. So if you put that into this, that's the size of Zerubbabel's temple. If that writing of Hecataeus, which came from that, and I believe this is in your notes too. I think this screenshot right here is in your notes. Except I don't think I included that little extra court of Solomon's temple. But that gives you a difference of sizes. So now the temple of Zerubbabel's temple, but it didn't have the glory of Solomon's temple. It didn't have the gold and the silver and the ornamentation, all that's described in Solomon's temple. I don't think this temple had anything like that. But this gives you the size, the area that the temple was built in and set forth. But this is where it's being built. This is the location. So while I'm on this topic, I was asking myself, well, how big is this area? Could Ezekiel's temple actually fit here? That was my question. So then I looked in the Mishnah. And the Mishnah says the sanctified area of the temple was 500 cubits by 500 cubits, which is exactly what Ezekiel's temple was. So How big is this? This is from what's that called? Google Earth, looking straight down on the Temple Mount area. I've zoomed in here, and just to let you know, those walls of the Dome of the Rock are 60 feet. Each of those little sections of that octagon, 60 feet, 60 feet, 60 feet. So based on that, I was able to calculate, and this right here, that blue area, that is the size of Ezekiel's Temple. 750 feet by 750 feet. The sanctified area of the Temple Mount would fit right there. So the location has the space available. As I said, when we were there, when I looked, there's a lot of space. It seems like it's a wide open area for this Ezekiel Temple. So there it is. The dimensions are 750 by 750, which would fit the Ezekiel Temple. So while we're on this, will there be another physical temple? Is that actually going to happen? I know there's some who think that the reference in Revelation is metaphoric, which it could be. But the more I look at this, I think they're going to build another temple. I think it's good. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetime, but I think it's going to happen. And I think this will be the start of the end. At least going to that point. In Revelation, he was given a measuring rod. He said, get up and measure the temple. Measure the temple of God. And he also says, measure the altar. And he says to measure the people who worship in it. So it's like he's measuring the temple. He's also measuring the people. Like that's, when you're measured, that means kind of like judgment. Then he says, leave out the court, which is outside the temple, for it has been given to the nations. This new temple is given to the nations. They'll tread underfoot for 42 months in this temple. In Matthew, Jesus said, the gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all the nations when the end will come. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. And then another verse about the future is 2 Thessalonians 2. He says, now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, that you be not quickly shaken for your composure or be disturbed either by spirit or letter, as the effect the day of the Lord has come. Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. So if you take these verses from Revelation, Matthew, and Thessalonians, they're building a temple of God, measuring the temple of God. You'll be standing in the holy place, and this son of perdition, destruction, will have his seat in the temple of God. So that brings me to the Temple Institute. And I'll talk about this more when we get to the golden candlestick, because this was something I learned in the 2006 trip to Israel. The Temple Institute, and you can read all about it in templeinstitute.org. The Temple Institute is dedicated to making the Holy Temple a reality in our day. And toward this end, the Temple Institute has for 36 years been building and planning and researching and teaching and sharing our reconstructed sacred vessels, priestly garments, books, paintings, red heifer candidates, teaching insights on our love for Hashem and the Holy Temple. It's only the generosity of your hearts for your continued important work. Only together can we build for Hashem, that's the name, a sanctuary and a house of prayer for all nations. This is the Temple Institute. And these are supported, it's like 4 rabbis that are doing this. It's supported by the government of Israel. Here's another thing that the Temple Institute says. The Temple Mount, in Hebrew Har Habayit, known in the Torah as Mount Moriah, is the holiest spot in the world for all mankind. It's the location of both the first and second holy temple. Here, God commanded Abraham, father of the Jewish people, to build his son Yitzhak, according to all the prophets of Israel, when the third temple is rebuilt on the same spot. This will usher in an era of peace and harmony, unparalleled in the history of mankind. It is a fundamental principle of Jewish faith that the temple will be rebuilt. The temple is unlike any other place on earth, for it is the spot where God chose to rest his presence and to make himself known to man. Thus we find many expressions in Torah, such as the place that I will choose, the place that I will show. From the very beginning of time, this one location was set aside and sanctified by God as the focal point for man's spiritual energy. So, that's where the temple was, the Solomon's temple. That's where Zerubbabel's temple was. That's where Solomon's temple was. And that's where they're going to build a new temple, at this location. And this I just found, and this was one of those things I was like, whoa, what? Regarding the Temple Institute design, it says the accepted design of the Holy Temple is described in the Tactric Midrash of the Babylonian Talmud. These principles are universally accepted as legally binding by the great Torah scholars through the generations. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And this I just saw just yesterday. Right here is the Mishnah. I have the Mishnah is the Talmud in written form, and you have all the Tactrics. And it was the Tactric Midrash from this Mishnah that says that the second temple sanctified area is going to be 500 cubits by 500 cubits, which is the same as Ezekiel's temple, 500 cubits by 500 cubits. So I haven't had a chance to do this yet, but now I want to, although this is really tough reading, I want to read the Tactric Midrash and all the measurements for the temple and compare it to Ezekiel's prophecy. Because this, according to the Temple Institute, is what they're using for their blueprint to build the new temple. Anyway, that has nothing to do really with the vision here. But like I said, I could go on this forever. But anyways, let's move on. So, he's measuring. We're in a construction project. He lifts up his eyes and says, there's a measuring man with his hand. He says, where are you going? He's going to measure Jerusalem, this holy location, this city, God's city, to see how wide it is, how long it is. And behold, the angel speaking to me ran out, and another angel without coming out to meet him said, run, speak to the young man, saying, Jerusalem will be inhabited without walls because of the multitude of men and cattle within it. For I, declares Yahweh, will be a wall of fire around her. So what does that mean? I'm going to be a wall of fire. Again, in the context, they are building this temple in the midst of these nations that hate them. These nations around them that want to frustrate their building. And here again, in this encouragement, he says, Jerusalem's going to be inhabited. I, Yahweh, am going to be a wall of fire around Jerusalem. I'm going to be a wall of fire. So what do we think of that? Well, when I think of this, where the angel's telling him that he's going to be a wall of fire around them while working on the building project, they don't need to be afraid. Yahweh is their protection. His glory will be in their midst. It reminds me of Psalm 34:7. The angel of Yahweh encamps around those who fear him and rescues them. It also reminds me of the record in Kings when the king of Syria, Elisha the prophet, kept telling the king of Israel the plans of the Syrian, and the Syrian said, we got to go get that prophet. So he sends the entire Syrian army to the city of Samaria and encircles the city to get one man, to get Elisha. And then you have the record in 2 Kings 6:15 through 17. And when the attendant of the man of God had risen early and gone out, behold, an army of horses with chariots was circling the city. And his servant said to him, Alas, my master, what shall we do? So he answered, Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Then Elijah prayed and said, O Yahweh, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw, behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elijah. So, from a physical point of view, it looked kind of bleak. But when the wall of fire, when Yahweh's protection is around you, you don't have to be afraid. And that's an essence of what's being spoken here to Zerubbabel, to Joshua, to the people from Zechariah. Yahweh's going to be a wall of fire. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to worry about having a walled city. I'm your protection. In the future, it says, and this I believe is talking about the millennial kingdom. In that day, Isaiah 4:2-5, the branch of Yahweh will be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of earth will be pride, the adornment of the survivors of Israel. It will come about that he who is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy. Everyone that's left after the Messiah comes, those who are left, everyone who is recorded for life in Jerusalem, those who are in the book of life, which we know today is both Jew and Gentile, those who make it, who are part of this kingdom. When the Lord has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and purged the bloodshed of Jerusalem from her midst by the spirit of judgment and the spirit of burning, then Yahweh will create over the whole area of Mount Zion and over her assemblies a cloud by day, even smoke, and the brightness of a flaming fire by night. For over all the glory will be a canopy. So, at that time, this was an encouragement to those people. Yahweh is here. You know, whoever the four carpenters were, they're going to defeat the four horns. We saw that in the last vision. This vision, you don't have to worry about your walled city. Yahweh is your protection. But in the future, this literally is going to be the case in that New Jerusalem, not the New Jerusalem, but the Jerusalem of the millennial kingdom, when the Messiah comes and reigns. Then, here in verse 6, after he tells them there's going to be a wall of fire, he has this statement, verse 6. Ho there, flee from the land of the north, says Yahweh, for I have dispersed you as the four winds of heaven, declares Yahweh. Ho Zion, escape, you who are living with the daughter of Babylon. So, what does this mean? Flee from the land of the north. First of all, the Hebrew phrase daughter of Babylon is an idiomatic use for Babylon itself or the people of Babylon. And this seems to be a call at this time in history for the remnant of Israel, for the remnant of the Judeans still in Babylon and Persia to flee, to leave the land of the north, to return to the land of Israel. Just to give you reference, I don't know if I showed you this. This is where Elam, Susa, that's actually the Persian Empire, and Babylon is there. And the way they would travel over to the land of Israel is they would go up the Euphrates River up to Syria or Aram, and then they would come down from the north into Israel. So that's why it says flee from the land of the north, because that's the way you would come. They would come up north and then come south into Israel. So the prophecy is to flee. Now, we know there were like 42,000 that came under the command of Cyrus. There's probably more than that still in Babylon at this time. I don't know how many are left. More come with Ezra later on, and more come with Nehemiah. But there's probably more in Babylon than are in Israel. And here's a call for them to flee from there and come to Jerusalem, come to Israel, because God's a wall of fire and protection again around his city. Jeremiah has this interesting, and I think this is really prophetic about a future Babylon. That Jeremiah was one of the last prophecies in Jeremiah. And in Jeremiah 51 is all about Babylon. And in verse 6 he says, flee from the midst of Babylon. Each one of you save his life. Do not be destroyed in her punishment, for this is Yahweh's time of vengeance. He is going to render recompense to her. Babylon has a golden cup in the hand of Yahweh, intoxicating all the earth. The nations have drunk her wine, therefore the nations are going mad. Suddenly Babylon has fallen and been broken. Verse 44, I will punish Babylon. I will make what he has swallowed up out of his mouth, and the nations will no longer stream for him. Even the wall of Babylon has fallen down. Come forth from her midst, my people, and each of you save yourselves from the fierce anger of Yahweh. Now, when Zechariah is writing, Babylon's no longer there. Babylon has already been defeated by the Persians, right? So they're still living in Babylon. I think the city's still there because I think actually Alexander the Great came to Babylon. So the city's still there, but it's not the capital. It's not the powerful nation the Persians are. This is most likely a prophecy of what is yet to come. In the book of Revelations, there's 2 whole chapters dedicated to the destruction of Babylon right at the end of the age. I have my ideas of what I think Babylon is in Revelation. It could be the physical Babylon, but I don't think it is. But what God says here is on that day, get out of town, right? Get out of Dodge, because Babylon is going to be destroyed. It kind of reminds me of what Jesus said in Matthew 24 about the abomination of desolation. He says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, those in Judea, flee to the mountains. Get out of Jerusalem. Leave town. So, anyway, that's part of this. The immediate prophecy for them is to flee that land, come here. In an eschatological point of view, the future of Babylon is destruction. So when it comes time for Babylon's destruction, it's time to leave. Then it goes on in verse 8. For thus says Yahweh of hosts, after glory, he has sent me against the nations, which plunder you. Again, these are from the verses we've seen earlier. The nations, it comes up again. I think it's the 3rd time the nations have come up. These are the nations, the 4 horns that were in the previous vision. He has sent me against the nations, which plunder you. For he who touches you touches the apple of his eye. For behold, I will wave my hand over them, so that they will be a plunder for their slaves. Then you will know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me. First, I want to just look at this phrase, after glory, because I didn't understand what this meant. After glory, he has sent me against the nations. What's he talking about? I thought that the REV translation of this makes a lot more sense. The REV version says, for this is what Yahweh of armies says, in pursuit of his glory, he has sent me against the nations who plunder you. REV translates that after glory to in pursuit of his glory. And I think that's much better translation, much better understanding. In pursuit of God's glory, in pursuit of the glory of Yahweh, he has sent against the nations that are plundering them. Again, in this 3rd vision, the nations are mentioned. This is the 3rd time now where we see this judgment on the nations. God will be a wall of fire over Jerusalem, and the angel of Yahweh is going to take care of the nations. This is where that angel of Yahweh, I think, helps to understand what's being communicated here. As you get these pronouns. Because look at this. He says, after glory, or in pursuit of his glory, he has sent me, the angel of Yahweh, against the nations which plunder you. For he who touches you touches the apple of his, Yahweh's eye. For behold, I, the angel of Yahweh, will wave the angel of Yahweh's hand over them, so that they will be plundered for their slaves. Then you will know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me, the angel of Yahweh. Because that's the only way that I understand this pronouns, me, going back and forth between God and how the angel of Yahweh is that agent of God's wrath. Just like when the Assyrian army was coming up against Jerusalem, the angel of Yahweh went out and in the night killed 185,000 Assyrians. Here, the angel of Yahweh is the one that is going to take care of them. And those who plunder, he's going to take care of the thing. So, then it closes out with this part in Zechariah 2. And I think this is very much eschatological here in the end of this. Sing for joy, and be glad, O daughter of Zion. For behold, I am coming, and I will dwell in your midst, declares Yahweh. Many nations will join themselves to Yahweh in that day, and will become my people. I can tell you right now, many people did not join themselves to Zerubbabel and Joshua. Many people did not join themselves to Ezra, Nehemiah when they arrived. Many people did not join themselves to Israel during the time of Maccabees, and many people did not join themselves to Israel in the New Testament. In fact, they destroyed Jerusalem, and in 70 AD the Romans destroyed. So this right here, this has not happened yet. That this is going to happen in this coming day. Many nations will join themselves to Yahweh in that day and will become my people. And they'll become my people. And I will dwell in your midst, and you will know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me to you. Yahweh will possess Judah as his portion in the Holy Land, and will again choose Jerusalem. Be silent, all flesh, before Yahweh, for he is aroused from his holy habitation. I like the way that's worded. How is Yahweh coming in the future? Well, first of all, the phrase daughter of Zion is an idiomatic way saying for Jerusalem or the people of Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem, oh, daughter of Zion, I'm coming, and I will dwell in your midst. And then it says in verse 11, in that day. This is the first time when this is going to come up more in Zechariah. This is the first of 20 usages in the book of Zechariah of in that day. In that day is referring to the Lord's day. It's referring to that time when the Lord reigns through the Messiah in the millennial reign. In that day, the nations are going to join themselves to Yahweh. And it says many nations. I can't help but think of the promise to Abraham, where he says, in Abraham, the promise to Abraham, in Abraham, all nations will be blessed. This is when this final promise to Abraham is going to take place. This is the time of Zion. In that day is when Yahweh, and how is Yahweh coming? He's coming through his regent, Jesus, his king, his son, is coming back into Jerusalem, and he's going to dwell in the midst through his son, Jesus Christ. Jesus, the Messiah, as God's man on the earth, is going to rule in that day. He's coming, and that's how Yahweh is going to dwell among his people. Many nations, this comes up again in chapter 8, and we'll look more about the prophecies about this day when many nations join themselves to Yahweh in the future. The phrase will join, that many nations will join themselves to Yahweh. This is covenantal language. To join is used of marriage, where you join in union, in a covenant. The nations won't simply exist and be blessed. They're most likely going to become part of the new covenant. And I believe this is partially already began with Jesus. With Jesus, there's no longer Jew or Gentile, but all people most of us, I don't think, are Jewish here. Maybe some, I don't know all of your background, but that day coming in the future when all the Gentiles, all the nations will be joined, and this has begun with Jesus the Messiah, where he has called out both Jew and Gentile to be part of this, but there's a day coming when Jesus himself is going to be in Zion, in Jerusalem. On that day, he's coming, and Israel is going to be blessed. All the world will come into subjection to Messiah in the millennial reign. It'll be a wonderful day. And Yahweh will be a wall of fire around Jerusalem. And that's where the center of the earth is going to be. Right there, where Zerubbabel is building this temple. So, that's a lot. What can we learn about the time of Haggai and Zechariah? In this third vision, Zechariah sees a man with a measuring line going out to measure Jerusalem. An angel runs to tell the man that this city will be inhabited without walls, and Yahweh will be a wall of fire around Jerusalem and will dwell in their midst. He will send the angel of Yahweh out against the nations that are coming up against them, to plunder them. They don't have to be afraid. This would have been an encouragement for these Judeans as they're working on the temple, as they're building, to not be afraid as they continue to work and build the temple of Yahweh. Further, this is an admonition in this vision for the Jews that still remain in Babylon to flee from the north, escape, and come from Babylon, come back to Jerusalem, come back to the land. What about future prophecy? In the future, Yahweh will truly be a fire of protection around Jerusalem. He will dwell in their midst, and in that day, many nations will be joined to Yahweh. That is the millennial kingdom, when the Messiah rules the nations from Zion, from Mount Moriah, from that center of the earth, from that location where this temple is being built. What about practically for us today? First, we today as Gentiles, praise God, are able to join in a covenant relationship with God and be a part of this promise to Abraham, the blessing of the nations. That in Abraham, all nations will be blessed. Also, this sets a type for a new third temple, which will be built in these last days before the coming of the Messiah and the reign of Christ in the millennial kingdom. Unless that's figurative, then all that stuff about the temple goes away. But the more I read the Bible, I think it's a literal temple. I think it's a literal thing that's going to happen in Jerusalem. I could be wrong, but I think it's going to happen. And this third temple will be built, and in that day, the Messiah is going to come, and everything's going to be made right. So, next week, we'll go into the fourth vision, and that'll be exciting too. There's a lot, I know, but I really wanted to cover that with the temple, because I don't know when else I could bring it up. I wanted to show you the location, the geography, the actual location on the earth, where they're talking about. So join us next time. God bless.